Hi, welcome to my kitchen. I am very excited you're here today. Today we will be canning up some ground beef. And in order to safely can meat, we are going to be using our pressure canner. So today we're going to be using a Presto. I love this one because I can do double layers. I do have an All-American as well, but it's shorter. So I plan on doing pint-sized jars. For about a pound of ground beef in each one, and then I'm going to double stack them. So I have 11 pounds of ground beef here, and I have found in the past about 5 pounds of beef will do about 6 pints. So I know about where I'm going to be getting with this. So I just took them out of the freezer and let them sit and thaw. Now I'm going to cut them all open and I'm going to pre-cook them. You don't need to cook it all the way, but you're going to pre-cook them about 80%. And I just found for this many, it's easier to just do it in a roasting pan. If you want to do it on a frying pan on the stove, that's fine. This is just quick and easy. So we just harvested 2 more of our cows, and my freezers are very full of meat. So then I like to take a whole bunch of the ground beef and can it and have it shelf stable on my pantry shelf, which is awesome because then I know if for some reason hydro goes out, there's always meat on the shelf that's safe and ready to use. And my husband really likes this one when we do like soups and chilies. It's just got a really nice consistency. You can use it for taco meat, all kinds of things. So I'm gonna get going. I'm gonna start cutting these open and putting them in the pan and frying them up. So come along on that journey with me. Okay, so we have all of the meat in our roasting pan, and it's just gonna slowly cook away here. So I will be breaking it all up shortly, but I'm just gonna actually toss the lid on it and let it start to cook down a little bit. And while this is cooking in the meantime, I'm gonna go ahead and wash all of my jars and have them ready to be filled. You don't have to sterilize your jars when you're pressure canning because the temperature goes over 250 degrees in the pressure canner itself. So there's a little less concern about making sure everything's sterile on the front end because you know it's going to get sterilized through the process. So I will be washing that. If you're looking for a really great resource for pressure canning, I love having books. This is the complete guide to pressure canning, and it has all the timetables in it. So I just open it up to beef, and I can look that ground beef. I need about 14 pounds to make 14 quarts. We're going to process it for pints. We're going to process it for about 75 minutes at 11 psi, or I'm using a weighted gauge, so that'll be at 10 psi. So I love this resource because all kinds of meats, all kinds of vegetables, pretty much anything you'd want to pressure can is in here, and it's a really great guide. So let me go wash those jars and we'll come back. Okay, so now we have our beef all ready to go. You just want to kind of mix it up to make sure that everything is cooked fairly evenly. So it is brown. There is a slight hue of pink to it, and that's okay because it is going to be thoroughly cooked in the jars. So you just want to make sure that you don't have any clumps of anything raw, and everything in here is looking really good. So then I'm just going to go ahead and turn off my roaster, and we are going to get ready to fill our jars. So things you need to have ready while this was cooking: I washed all my jars, I got them ready to go. I pulled out my funnel. I have my ladle. Now this is a ladle that I like to use because there is fat in the meat. I can ladle it up and drip some of the fat out. And I already washed up my lids. I have them ready to go. And I've prepped my canner. So what I've done for that is I have it ready to go. And on the inside, I've already put water. So there's actually a measuring line in the canner itself that shows you where to fill to with water. So you're actually only filling it about 1.5 to 2 inches with water, and then everything else is going to be done with steam pressure. So it takes very little water. In the bottom of the canner, there is a tray so that the jars aren't sitting directly on the bottom of the canner. A little bit of water there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of vinegar to this. So maybe a tablespoon or two. If you're a measurer, you feel free to use a measuring spoon. I just kind of dump. And that is, so if you have any kind of hard water, when you pressure can your jars, if you don't use the vinegar, you can start getting a film buildup on your jars. So I like to use just a little bit of vinegar. You don't want to use too much, otherwise it will actually eat away at your rings. So you just want to add a little bit of vinegar, and then as we add our jars, I have another tin layer. I can't think of what it's called right now. Anyway, so we're going to fill our jars, we're going to put them in a canner, and then we're going to put this on, and then we can do a layer on top. So we can actually do 18 pints at a time in this canner, which is super handy when you want to do lots. So what we're going to do to start is we are going to fill our jars. So I just take my funnel and put it on my jar. I'm going to take my ladle and I'm going to grab my meat. And actually, I'm really impressed, this isn't too fatty. And we're going to fill it up to about 1 inch of head space. And head space is just the area between the food and the lid. So on a standard pint jar, so I'm just going to grab something to measure out with here, or just kind of push down so that I don't make too big of a mess. You don't want to pack down your meat. It'll work. If we were putting liquid in this, you would want to debubble it, which is you're just going to slide something around in the jar to get all the bubbles out. So you can see, actually I can see there is fat in there. I better drain some of that out. Your head space on a jar, if you're looking at 1 inch, it's about the bottom ring on the bottom is about 1 inch. So I believe actually I'm supposed to leave 1.25 inches. So I can add a little bit more to this, and then we're going to fill the next jar. So I'm going to get all of these jars filled, and then I will come back and share that with you. Welcome back. So we have all of our jars filled, and I wanted to show you, so I had taken the funnel and filled the jars, and then what I did is I simply took them, and on a towel or on a rack, not on a hard countertop, you can just take it and kind of bang it just to help everything settle so you have an accurate idea. I also have just a straight tool. I just kind of go around and make sure there's not big pockets of air. And then once I'm comfortable with that, we are ready to go. So the way we are doing these jars is called hot packing, which means we've had our meat, we've made it hot, our jars were warm when I washed them, and then it's all going to go in hot. You can actually cold pack your meat as well, which means you can put raw meat in. So you could take like stewing beef or chicken or fish or any of that, and you can raw pack it into the pressure canner and cook it that way. One of the reasons, the main reason you definitely want to cook your ground beef first is the fat. So I don't know if you can see this bowl, and this isn't even all of it, there's still some in the roaster. I ladled out so much fat, and fat doesn't store well. So you really want to cook out a lot of the fat so that you're just have the meat. There will, when you're done cooking, of course there'll be some fat in there, but you want to take the majority of it out because fat will spoil quicker than the meat will. So once your jars are ready, you just want to take, again, a warm cloth and just kind of wipe them down. These jars are warm, but they're not super hot, just because we have worked with a fatty liquid. You want to make sure that there's really no fat on the outside of the jar. Now I am going to clean each of the rings themselves with some vinegar water, and this is just to make sure that there's no fat at all on the edges, because if there is, your seals or your lids will not seal. So you're just gonna make sure everything gets clean. Another really important practice is when you wash your jars, just run your finger along the edge of the lip, I guess, just to make sure there's no dents or cracks. it's a good idea to hold it up and visually inspect each jar as well, because if there's a crack, it will not seal. And if there is like a hairline crack, your jar will bust in the canner, and that seems like such a waste. So what I'm going to do is just have a little white vinegar and a clean cloth, and I just put a little vinegar on my cloth, and I'm just going to go around the top edge of all of my jars and make sure that there is no fat or ground beef or anything on any of my jars. I just washed them, so I know they probably are, but that fat is really hard to get rid of unless you have a nice vinegar that's going to eat through that. Oops, there we go. All right, so we got all of our jars, and I can see that they're clean. I felt that they're clean, and then I ran vinegar over them. So then we're going to take our clean lids and just put a lid on every jar. You don't need to add anything else to the jars. You don't have to top them with water. You're literally just canning the meat. So I think I did wash up 14 or 15 jars, and we just filled up a dozen. But it's always good practice, have a couple extra jars, because you would rather have extra than not enough. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our lids, and again, we're gonna do finger tight. So you're gonna put it on till you feel resistance, and then just a little turn more so it's nice and tight. It's really important that they're sealed enough, but not so sealed, so cranked that they can't be open, because when this meat is heating up in the pressure canner, it's gonna build up pressure and it's gonna expand, and it's gonna push all of the oxygen out of the jar through the pressure canning process. And then when we take it out at the end and put it on our counter, it's gonna vacuum seal it shut. So we need it to be loose enough so that the air can get out, but tight enough so that it's nice and snug and can seal when it's time. And again, when you're dealing with higher fat products, you definitely want to make sure that you have the right seal on there. Otherwise, you can end up getting fat between the seals, and then you have a failed seal. So again, we're going to go finger tight and then just a little more. So then we are going to take all of our jars and we are going to place them in our canner. And the bottom of the canner will hold 9 jars, and then we're going to put on the divider, and we're going to put the rest of the jars on top. So I will do that and come back. Okay, so we are back, and I have my bottom row on, and now we're going to put our tray, our dividing tray in, and then space the last 4 into the canner. So we're not using it to its fullest advantage, but that's okay. We still get to do some level cooking. So then we are going to take our lid, and this lid has a gauge on it so that you can see it's got a gauge on it. But I don't like to depend on the gauge. You do need to get these recalibrated every year. So I do have a weighted gauge for that. So we're going to put that on as we go. And a really important thing, you always want to look over your lid, make sure everything looks good. There's a vent pipe here. You always want to hold it up to the light and look through it, make sure you can see. And then just visually inspect the safety valve and the locking valve. Now, a lot of people are really worried about using the pressure canners because they think it's going to blow up. Now, possibly if you have a canner from 100 years ago, but the new canners have lots of safety features in place. So one of the great safety features is just the blowout valve. If by chance you get too much pressure built up in your canner, the blowout valve will actually blow out and release the steam so that it can't overpressurize. Now, the downside to that is if it does that, it will change the pressure in the canner so fast, all of your jars will break. So that would be a waste. So it's really important to be watching your canner while you are canning. So what we're going to do is I put the canner on the stove. I'm actually just going to turn it on just to like a medium high heat. We're going to slowly raise the temperature. And it has a little hook on this side, and that hook is for our safety valve. So once it reaches pressure, the valve itself will hook on here and you will no longer be able to take off the lid. And that's another nice safety feature. So we're just gonna put the lid on and then twist it to close. And now it is safely on. So we're gonna slowly bring this up to temperature over a medium-high heat. It will probably take, I would say about 10 minutes to get up to temperature, and then the valve is gonna start steaming. So you'll have steam coming out of your valve. And once you have a steady stream of steam coming out of your valve, then you set a timer for 10 minutes. You're gonna let it vent out for 10 minutes, and then we're gonna start building pressure. So I'm gonna let this heat up until it starts venting out, and then I'll come back and show you. So we just started venting, and sometimes it's really hard to see it, so I'm bringing the camera up really close. It's actually venting out of the lock stop as well, but you can, when you put your hand behind it, sometimes you can see it. But I'm going to let it vent now for 10 minutes. I set a timer, and after 10 minutes, we're gonna put the weighted gauge on here and let it get up to pressure. Okay, so we've been venting for 10 minutes, and you can see kind of on the wood here that it's very aggressively venting, which is great. And the idea behind the venting is that everything in the pressure canner, all the air in the pressure canner, is going to get pushed out and filled with steam. And that's what's going to start creating that pressure. So all the air and oxygen is going to get vented out. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our weighted gauge, and this is actually a 3-part weight. So the main part with the black thing is 5 pounds of pressure, and then this ring is another 5. So this is 10 pounds of pressure. This actually comes with a 3rd ring to make 15 pounds of pressure, but I need 10 pounds of pressure. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna pop that on, and it's gonna quiet it down a little bit. And then you're gonna see here on the pressure gauge, that's gonna start going up. And you can see the lock has already went up. So we know that the lid is locked on. We are nice and up to the base pressure. And then we're gonna watch this little arrow go up to the 10, because we want 10 pounds of pressure. We actually want 11 pounds of pressure, which is where it's gonna go anyways. Now, I don't depend on this dial, just because the dials can be wrong. I prefer to depend on the weighted gauge. So once the weighted gauge, it will start rocking, like it'll rock back and forth, and you'll hear air escape. Once this is up to 10 pounds of pressure, this will start rocking. And as soon as this is consistently rocking about 4 to 5 times a minute, then we know we are up to the proper pressure, and we're gonna start our 75-minute timer. So I'll come back then. So our pot has now come to pressure, and you can see on the dial gauge that it's just a little over, well, it looks like it's at about 12 psi. And you can see our little dancing gauge. So it is a little bit high yet, so I have turned it down. But when you're turning it down, you want to do that very slowly, because you don't want it to drop below pressure. If at any time in the next 75 minutes it drops below 10 psi, so 10 on the gauge, or the weighted gauge doesn't wiggle for over a minute, you actually have to start the whole process over. You have to bring it back up to the proper psi, and then you have to let it go for 75 more minutes. So you really, if you're going to bring down the pressure, you want to do it very, very slowly. So now we have it. I'll probably still lower it just a little bit, because I still think it should be more of a hula dance than a jig. So I would like to see a little bit slower. And I have my timer set for 75 minutes, and then we will come back and see how we turn things off. Okay, so it has been 1 hour and 15 minutes, and you can see we still have a really nice jiggle here. So I'm just going to reach around and turn off the heat, and we're going to continue to let the pot sit. You can take it off the heat if you want, but I've just turned it off. So rather quickly, actually, the weighted gauge will stop jiggling and the pressure will start to fall, and you'll see that go down. So what you want to do is you want to let this sit and naturally come down to a zero pressure. You don't want to take the weight off here. You don't want to try and make it go quicker. What can happen is the jars inside, the pressure can change really quickly and the jars can crack. Or if you have a liquid in the jar, it would actually siphon out from the pressure. So you can already hear it getting quieter and it's going slower. So we're going to just let it naturally come down to pressure. I find that takes around 30 to 40 minutes. Pressure canning is definitely a little bit more time consuming and you need a little bit more patience. However, there's so many things that you can pressure can that you can't water bath can. So for water bath canning, you're looking more like high sugar, high acid foods, where pressure canning is low acid foods. We're talking like beans and potatoes, meat. There's just so many different things that you can't safely water bath can, but you can very safely pressure can. And a lot of books, you can find it online too, just the timeline for how long to pressure can each item, whether it's in a pint-sized jar or a quart jar. But it's so handy, even though it is more time consuming. I just kind of schedule in other jobs that I need to do. Today I scrubbed my top of my stove clean because I can on it so much. It was actually kind of black around here. So I just find other things that I need to get done and do it while I'm waiting for everything to can. I do find I can a lot more in the winter because I'm generally inside more. In the summer, I'm often in the garden, so you can't start pressure canning and then leave. You really do want to be close by so you could monitor that your gauge hasn't went below pressure or is going way over pressure. So we're going to let this kind of come down to pressure naturally, and then I'm going to come back and we will take off our weighted gauge. Okay, so it's been about half an hour and you can see, well, maybe not from there, the pressure has went down to zero. And then I just always double check is I very lightly lift, and there's no, if there was still any pressure, it would actually, you would hear it when you lifted it up. So I can take this off. There's nothing coming out of here at all. It's still really warm. So a lot of times, especially if my house is cold, which it's not currently, but if it's cold in here, I will often leave the lid on for another 5 minutes after I take the weight off. And then after I take the lid off, I'm actually gonna let all of the jars sit in there and kind of have the temperature even out a little bit before I pull the jars out. So I can open the lid. You want to make sure that you open it away from you because you do not want to have a steam burn. So you just, actually I like to use my oven mitts. Just that way if it comes out the side, I'm not going to burn my fingers. And you just open it up and I put that off to the side. So, and then you can see, I don't know if you can see, there's still a little bit of steam coming out. So I'm just going to let those sit in there for about 5 or 10 minutes and then I will pull everything out. Okay, so it's been about 5 minutes, so I'm going to start pulling the jars out of the pot. They are very, very hot. Be careful. You always want to lift straight up, and I have a hood, so I got to go on a slight angle, and then put it on a towel, either a single or a double layer, and give it just a little bit of space so that it can cool down so they're not holding the heat for each other. You'll notice that the meat itself has let go of a lot of juices. So there is actually lots of liquid in there, and it's boiling. You can watch it boil, and it will probably boil for the next, I don't know, 20 minutes to an hour, and that's completely normal. You'll start hearing pings as the lid seals. And sometimes when you do something a little more liquidy, say like chicken broth, if you do that, when you pull it out, it will actually seal and unseal multiple times just because of the pressure, and that's okay. That's completely normal. What you're looking for is for when it pings and seals, it's going to be nice and tight. All the air has been sucked out of these jars, so it's a completely airless environment. This meat will be shelf stable for at least a year. I again do recommend that you eat that all within a year, but honestly, there's been things that I have found later. So that's, you can actually start hearing the pinging already here. So I'll continue to pull all of these jars out. These ones are bubbling really, really good. And then they're gonna sit undisturbed for at least 12 hours. So tomorrow morning, I will come and I will wash all the jars because it was meat and fat might have come out. I want to wash all the jars, make sure that there's nothing that can grow mold on the outside of the jars. And then we're going to take off the rings and write the date on them and what's inside them. It's always important to write what's inside them because sometimes you think, oh, I definitely know what this is, but then you can carrots and pumpkin and peaches, and they can look strangely identical in jars if they're not labeled. So I'm gonna pull all of these out and then we'll come back tomorrow morning when we clean them up and get them labeled. This is 1 hour later. It's still boiling. All right, it is the next day. It's actually the next evening. I haven't gotten to putting these away yet. So we have all of our meat done, and you can actually see it looks kind of funny. You can see the meat on the bottom and the top, and some of the fat, the residual fat has kind of settled on top of any of the liquid, so which is completely normal. That is exactly how it's supposed to look. It looks great. When you push the button top, nothing moves, and we just spin our rings off. And then we're gonna take, I just have a nice warm cloth, and you wanna wipe really good around the edges. You wanna feel your jar, make sure nothing feels sticky or slimy, like what you would expect fat to feel like. Just gonna grab my drying cloth here, and then I just dry them off. And then again, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna label on the actual lid. If you prefer a sticker or something like that, that's completely fine. Some people I've seen actually write on the glass. I like to write on the lid. So I'm gonna write what is in here. Even if it looks obvious, definitely write what's in there, and then put today's date. Whether you just do month and year or a year, that's completely up to you, but you wanna know when you can this because you wanna use it up in about a year. So that is how easy it is to pressure can meat. Some meats are even easier because you don't need to hot pack them. You can simply throw them in raw and pressure can them 24 hours. They are all ready. I already checked all my seals. They're all good. And these are gonna go on my cool cellar shelf so that we can enjoy these in days when we're just looking for a quick meal. So thanks for joining me in my kitchen. I hope you enjoyed. Have an awesome day.
Great, I know that was a lot of information. So for those of you who've never canned before, do you have a question?
No, I was just going to add to that. You were saying use it in a year, 30 years.
30 years, yeah.
We're still using stuff.
Best practice is they say like 1 to 2 years. And honestly, it's if you're canning properly, it's good for
It's all about the seal.
Yeah, it's about making sure your seal is really, really good. So I know that a lot of you guys filled out stuff and you had asked questions about canning. One of the things that a bunch of people had asked is about spoilage. Like how do you know it's good, right? Like, and really that's you're gonna know. Like if you have eyes, ears, and a nose, you're gonna know. So couple quick things. You're gonna look at it. If it hasn't been done properly, there could be mold in it. You're gonna see that, right? Like if it's bad and you open it, trust me, you'll know it's bad. If you go to pull the seal, like I can hold this seal, right? I need a tool to get this off. My son likes to show me how to do it with his fingernails. It's so bad for you, just use a tool. Anyways, when you pull this lid off, it's gonna make like a, if it does not, don't use it. Like, if there's no suction there, it's probably not good.
And don't throw the meat or whatever into the garbage if you've got chickens, because they'll eat it, and they're fine with it.
Yeah, oh, I've never, okay, you can feed it to your chickens. I generally, my rule with my chickens is if I don't need it, I won't give it to my chickens, so, but that's okay. So, do you have a question?
I'm trying to remember, way back, but I seem to remember my mom used to boil the lids as well.
Boil it, yeah, okay, so boiling the lids. So, best practices years back was that you would actually boil your seals before you would use them. They've done studies and stuff, and you actually don't need to. That is relatively new, I think in the last 5 or 10 years that they've kind of been saying that. So they're always doing more testing on food, on canned food to get a better idea of how to do it with the best practices. Yeah, so reusing your seals, I know some people reuse their seals. I do like a lot of dehydrating and stuff, so I actually just use that, like I reuse my seals for other things. But I would never ever reuse a seal for pressure canning for sure. When I'm going through that much effort, I want to know that my end product's going to be good, right? Because if you've used your seal before, it might look good, but it might not be okay. I'm not gonna lie, I have reused my seals for. Oh, is it? The rubber isn't good anymore. Okay, that's good to know.
That was my question.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, that was my question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I really love your presentation. Like, it was so detailed, and I do almost everything the same. I have a question, is pressure. I'm on 1003
Yes. Oh,
feet, so I do 15 pounds.
Yeah,
I
so-
don't know, do I better do 10? I mean,
okay, so what she's saying is elevation. So, where do you live?
between Exeter and St. Mary's.
Oh, you'd be
Okay.
the same elevation.
Yeah, so I,
Be okay?
yeah, so elevation, you're 1,003. So we are, where we are, we're like 600 feet above sea level. So elevation doesn't really apply to us, unless you're gonna move away to somewhere that's a different elevation. And then you simply need to change how many pounds of pressure.
Because I'm over 1,000, I thought I needed 15.
If you want to be really safe because you're over 1,000, but you're like
It only goes to
1,003.
11, like yours.
It goes to 11, yeah, you're probably fine with that. But elevation is more like if you're in the mountains and you're higher elevation, one, you need to have a higher pressure, and two, you need to probably can it longer. And if you have a good resource, honestly, Google's amazing. I'm a book person. You never know when our internet's gonna disappear on us.
Absolutely.
So, but all these books will actually have like each vegetable, each meat, everything, what it is, how long to cook it, how long to pressure it, and what PSI, for those who don't know, sorry, is pounds of pressure per square inch, yeah.
I
So,
have more a question about which weight I need, like which.
oh, okay, yeah,
I
so
use the 15.
just use the 15,
Could I use the 10?
probably.
Okay.
I think your 10 would be fine. So this is the way to gauge I was showing you. So if you have a Presto, I don't know where I put it, I probably didn't take it out. It comes with a little thingy. That is not a weighted gauge. It just stops it, and then you can view it in your dial gauge. So, Linda?
If I may, I just went on Amazon and you can buy Presto.
This is Amazon.
Yes.
I have no idea what I paid for it.
With the book, it comes together.
Oh, it
Same
comes with
book,
the book.
right? $223. And
$23
$223
for the canner.
for the canner and book.
Oh, that's not bad.
Okay, and then you can buy that gauge for the Presto cooker.
Yeah, and honestly, this is probably good for other than Presto. So this is okay, I'm gonna finish my thought. This is your weighted gauge. This is 5 pounds of pressure. And then it comes with 2 of these rings. They're 5 pounds of pressure. So this, I just made that 10 pounds of pressure. And if you need 15, you just put the other one on. I'm amazed I have them both because I only ever use 10, so I have not lost it yet. It's not that old. And then this is an All-American, so this is a different canner. This one goes on, twists on. This is an All-American. I love my All-American, but it's a smaller one. Same idea, except it has, oh gosh, this thing's heavy. It has knobs that you put on and twist on. So, and then it has a gauge that's a little bit different. It's all one piece, but the 3 spots are cut differently, so how you turn it, it does say 5, 10, and 15. How you put it on is the different pressure. They're both excellent canners. They both have their pluses. One day I will own the double quart size. It's like, except it doesn't fit on my stove where I can get jars out of it, so it doesn't make sense right now. So take that into account when you buy a canner. If you have like, you saw how I had to like turn it to get it out of my range hood? If your canner's too high, you can't get your jars out, so just there.
You can get those Presto at PD Mart too.
Yeah, I actually bought mine at PD Mart.
Yeah, great. And I was gonna say, your vegetables, are you using the Presto book for the recipe for the vegetables? You said you didn't like the carrots because they were mushy.
Yeah.
So I have the Amish recipe.
Oh, good.
If you want it, it's
Okay.
amazing.
Oh, yes.
10 minutes of canning.
And yeah, I don't think carrots was that long. Just so you know, every canner comes with a book. Okay, if you get a secondhand canner, you can find the book online. You want to read the one that comes with your canner, because every canner does operate slightly different. So you want to know how it's going to work. So just so you know, if you do get a secondhand one, read the guide so you're good.
Do you do your soups and stews in there too?
Soups and stews, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I do a lot of broths. I did bring a couple things that I do. I do can pretty much everything. I think this year I did like 1,000 jars or something.
Yeah, I can a lot, but I have a pressure canner with my daughter, but I've never used it.
You've never used your pressure canner? I have to let you guys know this. I have talked to probably upwards of 20 people from this church who've told me they have bought a pressure canner. They own a pressure canner and they're terrified to use it. So it is, I'm not gonna lie, the first time I used a pressure canner, I set it and I sat around the corner. And like I kept, okay, we're good, right? And I was like, every time I did anything, I was like trying to reach over to my thing, and it's not scary. Seriously, they all have these valves that'll blow out if you're not gonna blow anything up. Just makes, like, it's a metal thing. If you touch it, that's hot, it's gonna burn you. You gotta be careful, right? Like there's just things you can do. Okay, I wanna make sure I get through all the things I said I would get through.
And if a jar breaks, it does not explode. It just splits.
Yeah, and honestly, so I canned upwards of 1,000 jars this year. I had 2 break, and I knew they would. I looked at the jar and I went, maybe I shouldn't use this jar. Don't use the jar, just so you know.
The bottom seal just come off really easy.
Yeah, one went and one was the bottom. You can see those hairline cracks. So I had 2 that that broke. I had 2 that didn't seal, and it was because I was rushing to do my second batch. So I kept going like this and letting the pressure out. That was on me. And then I had 2 other ones. Oh, I had, it was a faulty lid. It like crinkled. So that was the first time I've ever had that. So I think 4 or 5 jars out of 1,000 that did not seal. So if you do it properly, things seal. Okay, so best canning practice, spoilage, we talked about that. We talked about botulism. Do you guys feel confident about botulism, or does it still sound scary? You don't. You do not know if it has botulism. No, botulism has no smell. No, you can't see it. You can't taste it. Nothing. If your jar is properly sealed, if you've done everything, it's fine. It really is. You gotta trust that you've done the process right. If you are afraid, boil it for 10 minutes, and the food is still good.
So when you're ready to store, is there anything that you should keep in mind when storing, temperature-wise?
You want it to be like cold and dark. Well, I have a pool cellar. Honestly, it's like 60 degrees.
Oh,
It's
and sturdy racking.
yes.
My son-in-law built shelves for my daughter, and the whole thing went.
Yeah. I know it's expensive. I have shelves from Costco, like the wire ones. Each shelf holds 600 pounds. The shelves are like doubled since the last 2 years. it's an investment, but with all of the time and effort you put into canning, you wanna make sure that you're shelving. Because, you know, when you're putting, 7 jars on at a time, you're like, oh, that's not that bad. But I do, 12 across and 5 deep. That's a lot of weight. And then I do that 6 rack.
And if you're doing a pound of ground beef with each jar,
Yeah.
and then the weight of the jar.
Yeah, the weight adds up, so you wanna make sure, if you're gonna spend all the time investing in your food, just make sure that it can hold it.
The siphoning, oh, sorry.
That's okay, go ahead.
The siphoning, like, lots of people are afraid because they lose all the liquid. Sometimes happens to me too. But I remember when I started, you lose all that because it's siphoned, and I thought it was not good, but it's still good.
Yeah, if the food in your jar siphons, the only downside to that is that between, if you have your jar and you have your lid, I do have lids, I'm not gonna open it, and stuff siphons out, you could end up with stuff on the rim itself, and then your seal could fail. I do actually go visibly check and sometimes touch my seals downstairs to make sure they're still good. But if liquid has siphoned out and you still have food in there, it's still good. It's still good food. But a couple ways to avoid siphoning is 1, get the proper headspace off the bat, and 2, don't rush. If you start pulling stuff out before the temperature has kind of evened out, you're gonna end up with some siphoning. So just take your time. So, do you have questions?
I'm a bit nervous.
Nervous canner? I get it.
So I'm told that like a hot water can.
Yep.
Wow, I found this in the car.
Yes.
It's Gabriel.
Is that equally as important
Yes.
as pressure canning?
Very important with pressure canning is that you use a tested recipe. Just because you want to make sure that what you're cooking and canning is going to be good. I'm part of some of these groups, so there's no judgment. But like there's rebel canners, and they can everything. And that is up to you, what you're comfortable canning and what you're comfortable serving to your family. Best practice, follow a tried and true recipe. There's so many tried and true recipes you don't have to, like, yeah, you definitely, especially with pressure canning because it's low acid, you want to make sure that everything is balanced out well. The same with water bathing. If you're doing like a salsa recipe, you want to make sure it's a tested recipe so your acid levels are high enough. Because you're just water bath canning, you're actually counting on the acid level for this, right? So you need to make sure, like tomatoes is one of those things that they're actually not a high acid food. I always thought of tomatoes having a lot of acid. It actually doesn't. It's very close to neutral. So that's why a lot of you would add like lemon juice or vinegar if you're making salsa, citric acid, stuff like that, just to make sure that the acid level is high enough. And it varies between tomato as well. So I have no idea how much time I have.
It's 7 to 2.
It's 7 minutes to 2.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm taking all of our question and answer time.
Good questions.
It is. Okay, I just gotta make sure that I got all this. So water bath canning is your pH of 4.6 or lower. And these ones you have to sterilize your jar. This is 4.6 or higher. You don't need to sterilize your jar. And if, I'm sure I missed stuff, that's okay. There's too much to learn in 45 minutes anyways. If you do want one-on-one classes, I can every week, so I'm open to that. So before we run out of time, I really love to invite Ange and Jen up, and yeah, you'll need a mic. And then if you guys have any questions for anybody, and then I don't know, if you have to leave, that's okay, but I just want to cover everything.
I just have a question for you. You said not to contact dairy and pumpkin, and then you mentioned something about starch. So all your carrots, squashes, pumpkins are starchy food. So it might have the family of starches that maybe do not work well.
Yeah, so you're asking about what you shouldn't, and pumpkins, I can can pumpkins all the time. You can can pumpkin, you just can't can pumpkin puree. Anything that's really, really thick and dense, you can't guarantee that the middle of that jar has reached the 250 degrees, and that's when you can start worrying about botulism, because the spores die at 240 degrees.
Couldn't you then water tank?
No, you definitely can't water. Can't. No, because that water bathing goes up to 212 degrees, and the spores don't die till 240. So you need. Oh, are you talking like the flowers? Sorry, I know I'm looking at two different sets of notes. Yeah, flower and all that. That's just, it's a texture thing. Like it's what's the word I'm looking for? Why you don't use cornstarch? It breaks it down. Quality. There, that's the word I'm looking for. Quality. Yeah. Okay. There's so many questions. So yes.
Now, after you've done all this and storing, you're saying make sure you have the proper rate, strength of shell.
Yeah.
Where are these shells? Is it facing in a cold cellar?
Yeah, in a cool, dark space. Yeah, so like, don't pick the warmest bedroom in your house. I also don't recommend garages. We do live in Canada and things freeze. Like if these jars freeze, they are going to break. It's just the way it's gonna go, so.
When you're doing soups and stews, you have to be careful about what spices you put in there.
Yes.
Because some spices just keep on.
Yeah, soups and stews, she's saying, you do need to be aware, some spices, one, get really bitter. So you kind of want to know what spices you're putting in, and some continually get stronger. So you don't want to putting something in and open a jar and be like, oh my gosh, this is awful. That's a huge waste.
I don't season my soup until I warm it up.
Yeah, neither do I. I did have someone ask me about the ground beef. I don't put seasoning in it personally because I don't know what I'm using it for. So I also don't do, like when I do pasta, like a tomato sauce, it's a tomato sauce. I personally don't add anything in because I don't know what I'm using it for, and I can add spices afterwards. I just dehydrate all my spices.
And you can cheat doing bone broth if you want to do beef or chicken or turkey or whatever by putting the bone and the meat in the jar raw.
Interesting.
Canning it on the bone.
Doing your bone broth with
It
the
comes
bone in
out
the jar.
very gelatinous, but it's very much a time saver
Cool.
and an electricity saver.
Yeah. Doing your bone broth with the bone in a jar. Yes, sir?
Do you know of anybody who's attempting to do canning in an off-grid environment? Or?
Canning in an off-grid, yeah, absolutely. You did a propane burner, you can get like you just want to make sure you double check your canner. Some canners do not do well with the really heavy, like because propane, it's that hard flame. You just want to be careful that you're not overheating because you can warp the bottom of your canners.
I've done it on my cook stove.
Yeah.
Another thing you might want to know is on YouTube, it's called Off and Red with
Doug and Stacy, I've heard of Doug and Stacy, yeah, they're fun to watch. They're all interesting. So, glass top, you can on glass top. They can get very heavy. That's the problem with the canners, like especially the double quart stack canners. The canner itself is already heavy, and then if you have 14 more quarts in there, moving it around, you can scrape your glass top, but yeah, people have broken the
I
glass
have
top.
glass top and I have the All-American, the big one, but I never double stacked it, so it's better not, is that not a good thing?
It's your stove. You can do what you want, take whatever risks you want, but yeah, it can. Honestly, the stove that you saw in there, like I've destroyed my stove. My dad's an electrician, he keeps coming over and fixing it for me. Because I have two canners going. So,
And that's a lot of heat builds up underneath.
yeah, I know underneath I have wrecked a lot of stuff. So we are in the process of making an outdoor kitchen, so I don't have to do this in my house all the time. Does anybody have any questions for Jen or Ange as well? I know that they had some questions on it too, but I want to make sure everybody has a chance. Everyone's feeling good about that? Oh,
do you climatize your plants at all before you actually go outside, like bring them out during the day and at night?
Yes, so that's hardening off. We are touching onto that in our next one in February. But yes, you have to harden your plants off. If you take your plants from inside under your grow lights and go and plant them out in the garden, there's a good chance you're not gonna have any plants left in about a week. Because they need that, the gradual temperature change. Having the fan on it and having a cooler temperature does help for hardening them off. It actually decreases your time taken, but you need to harden them off. And the other thing is, we have a greenhouse and we'll stick our plants in the greenhouse and just roll up the sides during the day. It saves having to move plants in and out. So if you have any kind of a small greenhouse that's actually gonna withstand wind, that's another way to do it if you have a lot of plants. But yes,
Otherwise you
have to harden them off.
I think also the sunlight has different ray composure, and it's kind of burning the leaves when you just put them for permanent in the open sun.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to take plants from under a grow light and put them out at noon.
No.
You're gonna wanna take them like 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 4. Start with some later afternoon, not direct sun, because they will literally burn to death.
Oh, I would baby my trays and I would put them out for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and then I would put them back.
Oh, you're so much better. I'm like an hour, all that work is an hour.
Like, what's the length of time for hardening?
So she's asking the length of time for hardening off plants? I don't know.
A week.
Yeah, about a week, because you generally, I don't start with 5-10 minutes, I start with like about an hour, but I'll keep it in the crook of the house where it doesn't get quite as much. Yep, and then you go up to 2, and yeah, it takes about an hour, or I mean a week, in order to be able to get them out longer. And if your temperatures are quite different from inside, you even take longer.
Yeah.
Or I would just buy pots and pots.
Pardon?
I would put pots on it and then.
Yep, yeah, you can put pots on top of them too, and then you can get them out a little bit sooner too. Yeah. Okay, I think we're gonna close, and then if you guys can stay around and ask questions if you want. So, yeah, so I thank you so much for coming out today. I hope you guys got a lot of value out of today. We put a lot of time and effort into this because we're really passionate about what we do. So hopefully you got lots out of it. We do have it as a free event because we want to continue to do this, but we do have a couple boxes. If you got lots of value and you want to donate to help cover expenses, definitely feel free. There's absolutely no obligation, but we want to keep doing these. We're hoping to do them once a month for the next year. We probably won't be doing stuff like this in the summer. That's going to be more on site and farm tours because we don't have time. We'd love to know what skills you guys want to see. I know a lot of people had asked about like crafts and stuff, learning about crocheting and knitting and all that jazz. So Lauren Riddell is doing a group in her home. So if you guys want, we're not going to cover that here. So if you want that, you can be there. Just recapping on what Jen said about knowing like what are your goals, what do you want to do? Because there's no way you can implement everything all at once. So start small, don't be overwhelmed, it's okay. And then a couple cool ideas is garden sharing and farm sharing. So if you're in an apartment and you're like, I really want to grow a garden, but I can't, you might know somebody who has the space to grow a garden but doesn't have the time. So connecting with people and kind of sharing that. Just gonna say, if you are gonna garden share with somebody, I'm speaking from many attempts of this, if you want to garden share and you want vegetables at the end of the summer and you commit to it, you need to go every week and weed. There is nothing better than someone saying, I'll split them on seeds. And then 6 months later, they come for their split of harvest and have not helped. So know that gardening, homesteading, all this stuff, it is actually work and it takes time. So if you're wanting the outcome, you get what you put into it. And so next month, we are doing transplanting, pruning, and fruit trees. Maple syrup, transplanting was one. Pruning and fruit trees was another. Okay, it's like there was 3. So, is there anything I missed?
Nope, I think that's it.
Okay, and yeah, if there's anything else we need to communicate, we'll do that. But I'm just going to close a prayer, and then you So, Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for the time of learning that we've had together. Thank you for so many people being excited and willing to learn new skills, even though sometimes it's scary and hard. Just pray that you be with everybody who came today, help them to just feel peace and knowing that every tiny little step that they make in this direction is a good step, and just brings them closer to what you have planned for us. Pray that you bless us this evening as we all go home.